Just some general self-observation. Last night, I finished another frame in the animation. Doing art activates different parts of the brain, so it causes specific neurochemistry. But there's all these amazing experiences that I was going through, the internal experience, and I wanted to share it online because I have no friends in real life to share these things with. So, or family or loved ones, etc. Which is an interesting thought because I was thinking how my mom had not, invited me. She specifically excluded me from my grandfather's funeral when I was only 2 miles away. I traveled across a lot of time and distance to be there. So she probably doesn't want me attending her funeral when she dies. I'm just going to assume that because she has cut me off for figuring out she lied to me about my grandmother's history of paranoid schizophrenia diagnoses and stuff. So she's mad at me for figuring out she lied to me, and she's punishing me for the truth, which is insane. Or for posting it on social media, but unfortunately, that was the only option that I had to protect myself from these lies, like her lies. It's not like I can go to any family members with this. They're very backstabby and etc. So yeah, I was thinking about family last night. And then doing that drawing, when I lay down, I felt this magical, loving feeling through me like this. It's difficult to describe. It's sort of like this ethereal air pocket through my body of warmth and safety and love. And I get that from art. Arguably because the only love and etc. that I have is not from anyone in real life, but in my fantasy world. So I saw a clip of Joe Rogan talking about how the worst press secretary in the history of the presidents was running Joe Biden's Twitter account. And I remember thinking how when I went sober and started doing brain exercises, I no longer found Joe Rogan or Dave Chappelle or any of the mainstream media puppets to be funny or entertaining. The more my cognitive functions increased, the less interesting and, you know, the less I wanted to watch those things. So I figure that he dumbs down his content and lies about his content to gain more views. It's a very common thing. More honest and intelligent your content is, the less popular you will be in a world full of morons and liars. So I'm going to sleep, but I wanted to share these things on Gab because my laptop was off, and the laptop's the only Twitter access I do. And Andrew Torba had he pushes drugs through Gab, which is weird because he's supposed to be like a Christian nationalist, but and it's the same thing that I do with Trump and etc. You pay attention to their actions, not their words, right? Andrew Torba's justification is he's a free speech, advocate, but true Christianity doesn't have free speech. There's blasphemy laws for a reason. When I ended up on Gab, I thought it was like the alt right and they were against degeneracy as Christians. And then to see the site flooded with drug and porn propaganda. Gab has porn. When Andrew Torres says in word doesn't match his actions in that aspect as well, because there's a lot of porn on Gab and drug propaganda, soft porn, etc. As Christians, right? And you get this a lot with white nationalists and Christian nationalists, is they'll be like, "Oh, the Jews are behind the drugs and porn," but then they will also horny post, cyber sluts and like drugs. And sure enough, he hit me with the CBD ad, and I was like, no, I'm not going to use his platform. I had gone pro with Gab before, and I wanted to do it again, but every time I get close to doing it, he always proves me right for not doing it because I know that if I go pro, I won't see these drug pushing ads, but they will be on my posts for people who don't pay for pro to see. So even though I'm against drugs, he will use my data to push drugs. It's weird, right? Christians for drugs, Christians who do drugs. Oh, CBD is harmless. Yeah, if it was harmless, it would be placebo and it would have no monetary effect or no monetary value. Because it has a psychoactive effect, it has a harm. um, so that was interesting. And it's weird because he sent me emails constantly asking for money. And I very specifically communicated this repeatedly. I don't want to support a website that pushes marijuana, CBD, etc. And they just ignore it. They don't reply. It's very strange. As Christian nationalists, they're also pushing drugs and porn on the Christians. Anyway, and I had this lucid dream where first my brother and I were somehow in a river, which I think when I think about my mom, I think about my brother by association, by memory association, etc. And there was these large snakes in the river, and I was warning him about them. It was very odd. And then I ended up on a dock, getting on a boat, and the dog couldn't keep up, but he was a little puppy again, like when I first got him. But he was struggling, like I'm gonna get on the boat and leave him behind, right? And I think that's my thinking about his death, which is likely coming up pretty soon. Should have happened already. I don't know how he's making it this far. Anyway, so then I wake up this morning and I kept thinking about this girl that I met at a dock back in Virginia, like the one who got away, right? And how much I wish she was here in my bed with me and all this stuff. Eh. It's insane to me that I don't know if it's social engineering or organic or both, but that society has morally declined to this state of corruption. That me, someone who doesn't do drugs, right? Monogamy, marriage, someone who seeks those things, is ostracized, abandoned, isolated, and neglected, punished for being good. And you could argue that it's social engineering, but I think women have this core biological behavior to be whores. And so it's just being activated by environmental stimulants, right? And that's pretty insane to me because, I mean, if you think about it, from an evolutionary perspective, I should say, making more copies of your genes to pass on to the next generation is your biological imperative. So, arguably, women are just following their biology. I recall figuring out there was this core nature to women because when I attended this Jewish church, like the Messianic Judaism thing, I didn't know that's what it was. There was this little girl who's like 12 years old, and she like got the hots for me, and she came over to pet my dog, and she leaned down to pet my dog, and showed me an eyeful of her tits, right? Like her shirt hung low, and I was like, oh, what the fuck, kid? And her dad was a security guard, and he figured out what was going on. So like she did this twice. She came to me, leaned down, boobs. How does a child have boobs? No, that's the accelerated puberty hypothesis, which is relevant to this conversation. Anyway, so when she did it the third time, the dad walked up right behind her and pushed her by her shoulders away, like, keep it moving, young lady. And I was like, dude, thanks, man. He looked at me like, yeah, I know. So I assume her mom's not in the picture. She's not from a two-parent household, and her dad is struggling to raise a daughter and keep income, etc. Another result of the socially engineered decline of morality, thus the decline of monogamy and the increase in divorce rate in the United States. These corrupt politicians and bankers, their policies aren't just harmless. They do have an impact on society. in that manner and others. Then I attended a different church, and a 36-year-old woman also got the hots for me and did the like almost exact same thing. She was smoother with like her slut strategy, like her horror techniques. She sat next to me and leaned in to whisper something into my ear. And when I turned my head, I got an eye full of her tits in church, and they were nice tits. I'm not gonna lie, that girl was pretty hot. But I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is church. You're supposed to be. I'm not supposed to see the goodies until marriage, right? But yeah. And then I ended up in the Mormon church because I thought they would actually provide a drug-free community. Yeah, that failed. But there was a 74-year-old woman with like double D boobs or bigger, and she did the exact same thing the 12-year-old girl did. She leaned down to pet my dog, and I got an eyeful of her gross, old, wrinkled horror tits. It was disgusting. It was like tits on a skeleton. It was fucking gross. But then I realized that there's this core nature to women, and they all do this. They all like inherently do this. So you see this exact same thing being activated by social media, this genetic component to um, whoring, right? The sexual instinct is activated in children through TikTok, all kinds of media, Disney, Google, Microsoft, etc. Google, Microsoft, and Meta alone are doing more to educate children than parents and schools are. In many ways, technology is shaping the minds of children, and that's not a new thing. I keep having these songs come up in my head that I don't want in my head. Like I hate the fucking music, but they're from the 80s and 90s because my brother and my mom played that music. Ugh. So my sentences in my head, my self statements, largely have been programmed into me in all these associations through media from the childhood environment. What was relevant again? Anyway, so when you see little girls twerking on TikTok and Instagram and stuff, you wonder what kind of government allows this, right? And this is a big thing with 9gag apparently, and all these other meme sites. I reported these to the FBI. Like, this is clearly child pornography. These little girls are acting like strippers, and nothing happened. Very weaponized. Is it the American military doing this? Is it the government? Is the government just so we can corrupt? They're not stopping corporations from doing these things, right? Very strange stuff. And why aren't Christians stopping it, like Mr. Torba? Oh, because he's selling drugs and he's on board with this whole globalist agenda implementation. It's pretty wild. Pretty wild to live through this age of corruption, which marijuana is a part of course, because all these cultures that are hypersexualized are drug cultures. Hypersexualized hookup culture of drug abuse and addiction. And that led me to this conclusion that whitey without Christianity is the alcoholism and syphilis rates in London in the 1600s, or the STD and drug overdose rates in America and European countries, white countries, in the current year. The decline in Christianity. And that's related to the accelerated puberty hypothesis. When America was 90% white and Christian, the average age of puberty for girls to start their periods was 16 to 17 years old. Since the 1960s or 70s, it's been documented to be getting lower 1 year per generation. Now you have little girls starting their periods at 6 to 8 years old and twerking like strippers on TikTok, etc. So, why was this allowed to happen is my question. But then I think about New Mexico, right? So my family's been there since 1608, Spanish Catholics. When the marijuana dealers and the strip club owners and pornography store owners, etc., showed up in town, Technically, the Spanish Catholics should have driven them out with firearms because bullets are the only things that stop drug dealers and pornographers, etc. No, instead, they were their best customers. And a lot of that has to do with media, the cultural evolution controlled by those who own the media and the government to prevent government from regulating media in a way that would have prevented this outcome. Right? It was deliberate. Um, they they were subverted. Vatican II was a big part of that. And so, even though they go to church on Sunday, they're watching television, listening to radio, reading magazines, etc., and magazine ads, soft porn, television, soft porn, music television, soft porn, and drug propaganda, etc. So, clearly, the government was more powerful than the church in this regard. And because Christians are so pacifist in the example of Jesus, right, just masochistic pussies, they failed to prevent this. Instead, they had these brainwashed stupidity attitude of, love your enemy and give them the cloak off your back and all this stupid shit. And so it's funny to me that Andrew Torba is being painted as some sort of like right wing extremist Christian nationalism, because Christian nationalism was America, a lot of America in the 1950s, and what happened? It failed to fight the drug and sex revolution. Drugs and porn cause a decline in Christian attendance, and Andrew Torba allows drugs and porn on his Christian website. Maybe he knows that corruption is necessary for thriving in a capitalist world, society, right? I don't know. But it's hilarious to me because all these conclusions were not religious for me. They were applied secular science.